Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy.
You might want to get you a pen and paper, Claire, because we know how you done like to not pay attention and lose track of the thought process. And I can tell you, we're going to discuss
you. It's not my fault. You take too long to tell a point.
We're going to talk about 7 people, so it's a lot for your brain.
I got me an ink pen then. Don't worry,
we don't want none of them window licking.
Window licking.
Yeah.
I'll take the note.
So today we're going to discuss the robbery, rape, and murder of Channon Christian and her boyfriend Christopher Newsom. The time of the murders is in the winter of 2007. Our location is Knoxville, Tennessee. Our triggers, I feel like I kind of just listed, but we also have some carjacking, kidnapping, rape, torture, and as I stated before, some murder of 2 people.
Let's get to it.
So we're going to discuss our victims first. We've got Channon Gail Christian. She was born April 29th, 1985 in Texas. She moved to Louisiana with her family as a child and then moved to Tennessee with her family in 1997. She graduated from high school in 2003, and she was a senior at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and she was majoring in sociology, and she was planning on graduating in December of 2007. She was only 21 years old when she was murdered. And then her boyfriend, he goes by Chris, but his name is Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr. He was born September 21st, 1983 in Knoxville, Tennessee. He was a former baseball player for his high school, and he graduated in 2002 from his Knoxville high school and attended Pellissippi State Technical Community College and became a carpenter. Chris was 23 years old when he was murdered. So she was 21 and he was 23. You got that so far?
Okay. Chris and Channon were the murdered people. And they seemed like they had a bright future with their college education.
Sure did.
Do you know how long they dated for? Did they meet in college? Well, I guess he graduated before her, but they could have still met in college.
I don't know how they met. I would assume they were together for quite a while. I'm actually not certain on that one. Now we're going to skip on to the 5 criminals. And I'm going to give you a brief history on these guys. First up is our 23, almost 24-year-old George Giovanni Thomas. He was born January 23rd, 1983. He went by the nickname of Detroit. George had a girlfriend who lived in Kentucky. Her name was Stacy Lawson.
She's part of this too?
Briefly, I'm going to explain it here in a second. But as soon as I'm done explaining her role in this, she's no longer involved-ish. So George was living with Stacy in Kentucky until December of 2006. Now we've got Letalvis Darnell Cobbins. He was born December 20th, 1982. He was 24, and he went by the nickname of Rome. In 2003, Letalvis had been convicted of 3rd-degree attempted robbery in New York. And also interesting, for me at least, Letalvis and the next guy that I'm going to tell you about, they're half-brothers. So their parents must be real proud.
What's his brother's name?
His brother's name is Lemaricus Davidson. He was born June 13th, same day as my son. But in 1981, Lemaricus went by the nickname of Slim. I am not going to call them by their gang nicknames. I'm going to call them by their birth names. But I was just giving you the information of
their Slim and Rome.
And Detroit.
And then there's Stacy.
Well, yeah. So Lemaricus had just finished a 5-year sentence in August of 2006 for a felony conviction in Tennessee for carjacking and aggravated robbery. He was also arrested for another robbery that he will eventually commit at a Pizza Hut one day after the murders.
So we got Detroit, Stacy, Letalvis, whatever his name is, Lemaricus. Who's number 5?
So Stacy doesn't count because if we're counting the women folk, then we got us a ton of people.
Well, I asked you if Stacy was involved as our 5.
Oh, well, I misunderstood. So we've got Letalvis, Lemaricus, George, Eric, and Vanessa. They're all involved. Stacy is George's girlfriend, and then Lemaricus, his girlfriend is Daphne. But we're gonna break down all.
Whoa.
I'm gonna break it all down. I was just done listing them people, but you had a question about them. They're criminals that I've listed so far.
Well, if the brothers are both felons or not, or just the older one,
So all of these people are felons.
including the girlfriends. Or just the
No,
men?
just the men folk.
Okay, now you didn't mention Eric and Vanessa, so who are those bitches?
I haven't even finished telling you about Lemaricus yet. So I done told you that he went by the nickname Slim, and he had just finished a 5-year sentence in August of 2006.
For robbery.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm tracking.
And then he ends up committing a robbery at a Pizza Hut one day after Channon and Chris are murdered, but we haven't gotten to that yet. He is only 25 years old. He's already a convicted felon. He has no job and no vehicle. And the way he earns his
but he's got a girlfriend.
The way he earns his money was by selling drugs. He was also known for snorting cocaine and smoking weed.
He was a pharmacist?
Sure was.
Just of the kind.
Yeah, I was going to say, just of the illegal variety. Anyway, so he had not paid his January rent for 2007. And the day after Christmas in 2006, his girlfriend, Daphne Sutton, was fed up with his shenanigans, and she moved out of the house that they were renting together that was located on Chipman Street, which that is the house that will be our crime scene. But she packed her furniture and the rest of her belongings and moved out. And he ended up helping a acquaintance or a friend, female, move into her apartment that was right up the street.
Sure
She's
did.
about. So
did he add in some of his things too? Because he's like, I'm not paying rent and the girlfriend just left, so I'll help you move in. Do you care if I also store my belongings in your closet?
So he apparently didn't have diddly squat, and she, in the process of moving it, with the exchange of him helping lift stuff, I guess, sold him like some bedding, and because I guess Daphne took the sheets off the bed too. So I'm gonna guess that.
Not to focus on the wrong thing, but if the man has not paid his rent, why is he buying things? I realize bedding is a thing that is a luxury at this point, because if you don't have a house to put your bedding in, just scrape up some leaves.
So his rent was due on the 1st, right? And it's only the 7th by the time they commit the murder. So he was a week behind.
Due.
I understand that, but if you let me finish my dang sentence, I was going to tell you that he helped her move her shit into her apartment, and in exchange, she sold him some bedding and some furniture she wasn't going to use. However, because he was broke, he promised to make payments to her between $75 and $100 a week until he paid off the furniture.
He can't pay his rent. He has a contractual obligation to pay that on the 1st, and he's a week behind. I wouldn't give him shit with a
He just needs to go sell him some drugs.
Is he cute? Is that what this is? He batted his little eyeballs at her?
I think it's a very unhealthy relationship, and we'll talk more about it later on in this here case. But anyway.
So, whoa. So he's a looker?
Honestly, I've seen what he looks like, but I didn't check him out in the sense of whether or not I think he is a looker, because I just chalked it up to this piece of shit is a piece of shit.
Like he could still go, not ugly, or it looks like he fell from a high tree and hit every stick on. You don't have to be attracted to him in the sense that your panties drop just looking at the picture, but you can do the, okay. I could see where if he batted an eyeball that he could get by being a charmer, or if he's a ladies' man, or did he peddle some crack for a
Okay, so check this out.
I just don't get behind he's getting bedding and furniture for a place that if he keeps going this way, he's going to be evicted.
So I just texted you a picture of Vanessa, Lemaricus, Letalvis, George, and Eric. And of the 4 men, I would say Lemaricus has hit the ugly branch the least.
Are we talking about Daphne? I'm just kidding.
So
you get what I mean? Because he's hitting that's his girlfriend, Daphne. Although, I guess it's not his girlfriend anymore. Turns out she likes a feller who pays his bills. He never paid her for her furniture, so she moved it.
Okay, so anyway, the first day that he was supposed to bring a payment to her, the girl that he bought the furniture from, would have been January 6th. So make a mental note of January 6th, okay?
January 6th, jotted it down.
But again, I done tell you that their parents must be super proud of them. Lemaricus and Letalvis, they done just criminals.
December, it's mid-December then?
No, it'd be late December because she done packed her crap and left right after Christmas. So I guess he didn't get her a good Christmas present.
He got her weed.
I'm going to guess, and I have no proof on this, but I'm going to guess she suspected him of cheating because she took the goddamn sheets off the bed.
Maybe they were fancy sheets. They were 2,000 thread count. Egyptian cotton.
I don't think so. But anyway.
But hold up. No. What the hell why would you... Don't growl at me. You're not a rabid animal. And why would you take somebody's sheets if you suspected them of cheating? Wouldn't you leave them there because they've been dripping with somebody else's swelch?
No, I would throw them out and be like, there, good luck having sex with somebody else on a bare mattress, you fucking pig.
So it's not like it's a condom. You can still have sex on a bare mattress. You can also have sex other places. So taking the sheets wouldn't be like, oh no, we can't do it tonight. The sheets are missing. Not a thing.
I'm guessing that mattress was pretty questionable. But just listen, we haven't even gotten through everybody, let alone get to the dang on crimes. But anyway, up next we got Eric.
And just so we're clear, I can't get behind the story if I don't know the characters. You're the one introducing all these people. I'm just trying to get an idea of the individuals they are. I've already scratched a line through Daphne. She skedaddled on out of there with the sheets, evidently.
Kind of. She dabbles back in after the murders, but...
Hey, who's the neighbor? I don't have her name that he's doing furniture sales with.
I did not write her name down because I don't... Her last name's Freeman, but she's not important. Not neighbor.
Furniture.
She's not a neighbor.
Furniture. I'm writing it down as the neighbor. It's too late. It's in permanent ink.
Well, for everyone that wants accurate information, she is not a neighbor. They don't live close enough. It's not a roommate. God damn it.
He's moving his things in. I'm telling you. That's why he offered to help her move.
Okay, so it's kind of important because the apartment complex that he is currently at, he is not capable of walking. No, God damn it, Claire. He is renting a house on Chipman Street. He does not know this chick, but he helped her move so that he could acquire things for his house because Daphne done took everything and left. So
was she Daphne's friend?
I don't know whose friend she is. I don't know how he I don't know how
he just wanders the streets to help people move things.
She was an acquaintance. I don't know their connection. I don't know how they done met each other.
Dealer.
This case is going to be probably, yes. But it is important to note that he would not have been able to help her move because he doesn't have a vehicle. He needed a ride provided. So keep that in mind. And that his first payment to this chick would have been on January 6th. Okay?
Got it. U-Haul chick.
Fine. Next up, we've got Eric Dwayne Boyd. He was born February 18th, 1972. He went by the creative nickname E.
Oh. I was going to say Dwayne.
Nope.
His nickname was Dwayne. He didn't spell it with an E.
It was just E. And he was the oldest of all these fools because he was 34.
Was he the ringleader?
No, the piece of shit we just talked about, Lemaricus, he's the ringleader.
Slim, the not real Slim Shady. He's the fake one. He's a Slim Jim.
So anyway, last but not least, we've got Vanessa Lynn Coleman. She was born June 29th, 1988. She is a sick and twisted young lady. And I say young lady because she was only 18.
She's the youngest. Yeah, I was going to say, she's the baby in this.
Yeah. And she, like some of them there girly teenagers we done talked about, likes to keep a diary. Also important to note because that ropes her in on being the sick son of a bitch that she is. Okay? George and Stacy lived in Kentucky, right? Like I mentioned when I first introduced George. In December of 2006, she brought her boyfriend George, Letalvis Cobbins, who again, I point out is Lemaricus's half-brother, and his girlfriend Vanessa Coleman, all from Kentucky, and dropped them off to go live with Lemaricus in Tennessee. Now, something important to point out is that none of these people, Letalvis, Lemaricus, George, or Vanessa, have jobs or vehicles of their own. So she's just dropping
got furniture.
That he's going to make payments on, and he's a drug dealer. So I'm wondering if they were going to help sell these here drugs, and they were going to start their little empire by being illegal pharmacists. But when Stacy dropped them off at Lemaricus's rental property, she noticed that there was an assault rifle and 2 revolvers in the house.
Where did they get that? And this fucker still hasn't paid his rent?
Not yet. And also important to point out is George, Letalvis, and Vanessa all smoke Newport cigarettes. So that brings us to the fatal day of January 6th, 2007. It's a Saturday. Now, Chris and Shannon had made a plan to go out for dinner, and then they were going to go to a friend's house for a party.
Naturally, because getting a job and paying your rent seems like
no.
the adult thing to do. Let's go party.
No.
You said all these people didn't have friends.
No. Hello.
Oh, we're on Shannon and Chris?
Yes. We've moved on. We're talking about the dreaded day.
I'm still riled up at these people not having jobs, and somehow they have things.
Yes. So keep in mind that I did tell you to make a mental note of, or for you, Claire,
a
real note. Lady. Yep. So that brings us to the day of Saturday, January 6th, 2007. Shannon and Chris.
You didn't tell me it was a Saturday. Morning or evening?
Shh.
I'm just trying to get the idea. Is this a brunch party or is this a drink-in party?
It's a drinking party. But listen, so they made plans to go.
Who hosted it? Was it Detroit, Rome, and Slim? Or were they party crashers?
So it did not happen like that. Forget all the criminals now. I introduced you to the people in the story, okay?
Yeah.
Now
forget. Shannon and Chris were headed to a party on Saturday.
That doesn't involve any of the other people.
That's what I'm asking. At some point, these people cross paths because that's how they end up as the victims.
Well, if you shush your mouth, I can then tell you how they get introduced. So shush it. Let me talk. Give me 5 minutes before you say another word other than, oh my gosh. Okay? So Chris and Shannon made a plan to go out for dinner and then go to a friend's house party. Or go to a friend's house for a party. That afternoon, Shannon went to her friend Kara's apartment to get ready for her date with Chris. And around 8 o'clock at night, Kara left and headed to the party at their friend's house. And Shannon stayed behind at Kara's and waited for Chris to come pick her up.
Whoa. She stayed at her friend's house and her friend left?
Yeah, but I don't, you know what I mean? I don't think it's that big of a deal because they're just like, she doesn't technically live there, but she stays there.
Well, what was the point of her going over there to get ready for her date and her friend's not even going to be there?
Because she went over that afternoon. They hung out all day together, got ready, and then...
She had gas.
Anyway,
Like, you go on ahead.
No, damn it, Claire. I said Shannon and Chris were going out to dinner and then going to meet up with the rest of their friends. So
I know. That's
Kara,
why I said when Shannon wanted to stay at Kara's house while Kara left at 8 p.m., that it was because Shannon had some bubbly guts, probably nervous about her date, and she had to let a couple turds fly before her big night.
No, she was waiting for Chris to come pick her up. You dirty little perv. Anyway,
you don't know what she was doing?
I do. Shannon got dressed all cute. She was rocking a pair of jeans, hot pink high heels, a navy blue, hot pink, and white striped sweater, and paired that with a gray purse. And on his way to go pick Shannon up, Chris stopped off at an ATM, withdrew $100 from his bank account, and around 9 o'clock, he dropped his friend Josh off at that friend's party.
Who the hell's Josh?
It's another friend. Don't get caught up on the details. I said shut up. Just shut up.
You told me to take notes. And I don't have Josh on here anywhere.
You forgot to take the note that I said don't talk for 5 minutes. Anyway.
I didn't think you were serious.
I sure was. But Chris drops his friend Josh off at the party, and then he was headed to go get Shannon. And
why did he drop his friend off and then go get Shannon to go to the same party?
Because
do they not believe in fuel conservation?
I apologize to our fans. Claire is having herself a moment because I've said it at least 3 times now that they were going to dinner first.
Oh. At 10 p.m.?
It's 9. What are you, 90? It's okay
Who
to
eats
eat
dinner at 9? That's not dinner.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, Grandma. Kara called Shannon and said, hey, Chris just dropped Josh off at the party and he's headed your way.
How does she know Josh?
They're all friends.
Okay, fine. Josh
anyway,
and Kara at the party.
The party at this friend's house was 10 minutes, a 10-minute drive from this house to Kara's apartment where Shannon is waiting for Chris. Okay, so Chris was last seen at this party at 9 o'clock, headed to pick up Shannon.
Well, you did not say he was at the party. You said he went to the ATM and then dropped off his friend. He was not at the party.
He wasn't at the party. He was last seen dropping Josh off at the party at 9 o'clock.
That's different than being at the party.
He was still seen where the party's taking place. It doesn't matter. Okay, we're talking about his whereabouts. He was last seen.
Yeah, his last scene would be important. It does matter.
Whether he went in for 5 minutes or didn't, the point is he was last seen at the party house, dropping his friend Josh off. Okay?
At what time?
So 9 o'clock. And it's a 10-minute drive back to the apartment.
So he was at the ATM and dropping off his friend at 9.
He went to the ATM, withdrew money, and then around 9 went to drop his friend off. So ATM, then drop the friend off. That was at 9.
And then Kara told Shannon, Josh
he's on his way,
and Chris is headed to get you. So you better get off the pot. And
she's our victim, so shut up already. Anyway, Chris shows up at the apartment complex, and Chris, by the way, since we talked about what Shannon was wearing, Chris was wearing a pair of jeans, black and silver Nike shoes, and a blue sweater with a white collar and a baseball cap. He and Shannon left Kara's apartment and headed to the parking lot to Shannon's Toyota 4Runner. Shannon was sitting in the driver's seat with the door open, and Chris was standing like inside the open door. And they were kissing and having themselves a little mini makeout moment, okay?
They were tailgating.
Sure. 10 p.m. rolls around, and Shannon and Chris's friends notice that the couple never arrived to the party. A few of the friends tried to call or text Shannon and Chris, but they got no response. Around 11 o'clock, so an hour later, 2 of Chris's friends went back to Kara's apartment to figure out what the hell's going on because Shannon and Chris still haven't shown up. They find Chris's truck in the parking lot, but Shannon's 4Runner was missing. For all they knew, they were off together still, maybe got distracted or whatever.
Decided to go for breakfast. Since we eat at whatever hours of the day and call it a meal.
Okay, Granny. But they were concerned because they couldn't get a hold of them, but not overly concerned.
Because they were lovebirds and they weren't sure if maybe they got to canoodling.
Yeah. But they did note that her Forerunner wasn't there and Chris's truck was. So now we're going to fill in those gaps for you.
Mhm.
Jesus, please be quiet so I can get it out before you focus on the stupid stuff. Okay.
You got a poo too.
Anyway, I'm not going to give you potty breaks if you keep this up.
Well, I got a vase.
Ew. When Channon was sitting in her driver's seat, kissing her boyfriend, Chris, the 4 men that I mentioned earlier saw the couple and decided they were going...
Detroit, Rome, and Slim, and E.
Also known as Letalvis, Lemaricus, George, and Eric.
I find that too much to remember. So if we could do George, Rome, Slim, and E, I got them in there.
Well, my notes, I done wrote their actual names. So, anyway.
Well, I'll provide you with their nicknames.
Sure. So these 4 troublemakers see the couple kissing and decide they're going to carjack them. By the way, the only reason these 4 troublemakers were at this apartment complex, Kara's apartment complex, is because Shannon's friend lives in the same complex that Lemaricus had helped move that furniture. And he was there to bring his first payment for the furniture she sold him.
So they decide, no, that's where he was going to get his money. He's like, it's due today. So we're just going to have to hope something pops up. And then when they went there to break the news, they're like, you know what? Got a better idea. Let's give her a Forerunner.
Yeah. Well, these pieces of crap decided to attack this couple. The 4 men were armed with guns as they approached the vehicle.
Do you know what time this was? How close to 11 o'clock was it? And just out of curiosity.
It wasn't. It was literally like
right after they got there.
Like 9:15. Yeah. Chris had just gotten there, got Channon, and they were getting ready to leave to go to dinner. Somewhere along the track of just stealing their vehicle, they decided instead to kidnap the couple. Channon and Chris were forced at gunpoint into the back seat of Shannon's SUV. They were then blindfolded and taken to the home located at 2316 Chipman Street, Knoxville, Tennessee.
So his house, Slim's.
Also known as Lemaricus, yes. The one that owes his rent. Both Channon and Christopher were repeatedly raped and sodomized. It's believed that Christopher had been sodomized in Lemaricus's home.
I'm going to say Lemaricus did it because he learned that party trick from jail.
Chris was eventually taken from the home on Chipman Street. He was barefoot, wearing a t-shirt and underwear. He was tied up and gagged and led with a mangled dog leash up to some railroad tracks, where he was then shot 3 times, and then his body was doused with gasoline and set on fire.
Was he alive or dead when they doused him?
He was dead. The third gunshot wound that he suffered from was fatal. We'll talk about that when I talk about his autopsy.
I'm at least glad for him that there was that.
Yeah. A man named Jerome Arnold was watching TV in his home on Chipman Street. So an actual neighbor of Lemaricus, or Slim, whatever you want to call this piece of garbage. And he said he lived about a block from him. He said around 1:45 in the morning, he heard 3 fairly evenly spaced pop, pop, pops coming from the direction of the railroad tracks. So our time of death for Chris was around 1:45. Another witness named Roy Thurman, he worked for a sandblasting company near Chipman Street. And he testified that on Sunday around 7:45 in the morning, he saw smoke coming up from the direction of the train tracks. So
who was over there that dragged him over there? Because where is Channon in all of this?
We're getting there.
And the ladies were present? I know you said Stacy drove them over there to pay the bill or whatever.
No, I did not. I said Stacy brought, in December, she brought Letalvis, George, and Eric and Vanessa to go live with Slim or Lemaricus. But then Stacy returned back to Kentucky. And Daphne, she doesn't live there. But Vanessa...
She broke up with Slim. But Vanessa's part of this?
Yes. She is Letalvis's girlfriend.
Side piece.
Yeah. So it's believed that Chris was sodomized and murdered, and that Vanessa held Channon captive in one of the bedrooms at Lemaricus's house.
Can I mention that's really fucking disgusting that she's watching Shannon while the other men are fucking her boyfriend?
Yeah. Both Shannon and Chris are sodomized and raped with an object also. And I think she did it. I'm not saying that the men didn't do it, but they find their semen in and on these two victims, but they're also brutalized with an object. And I think she did it. There's no proof of it. It's just my own suspicion, but
I could see that because they're all doing things too, and she wished she had a penis.
pretty much. But after murdering Chris, the four men returned to the house where they stripped Shannon naked except for her camisole and a sweater, and then they proceed to beat and repeatedly gang rape her. Shannon endured several hours of sexual torture, severe head injuries, and severe injuries to her vagina, anus, and mouth due to the sexual assaults.
So I'm going to say also, since this went over several hours, it's possible they weren't done, but their fellers parts were done. So they used an object out of frustration and anger.
So since there's 4 of them, I'm going to think that by the time each one finished, maybe the next one was ready to go. But
I don't know, because I feel like there were drugs or alcohol, if not both, part of this.
Yeah.
Imagine, well, I don't know if you want to imagine being a feller with whiskey dick and the desire to rape 2 people.
Yeah.
I feel like you could really have a lot of rage and then something that shouldn't be placed in somebody.
Yeah. Either way, it's just awful. It gets worse too, by the way. Meanwhile,
how does it get worse than them being dead?
They're not dead. She's still alive.
145? Like they go back after they burn him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Meanwhile, Shannon's mother and her friend Kara were repeatedly trying to get a hold of Shannon because when Kara arrived back to her apartment at 3:30 in the morning, she saw Chris's truck was in the parking lot and Shannon's overnight bag and stuff were gone, but her SUV was still not there, and no one had been in contact with them since Chris left to go pick up Shannon. Chris's friends and family were also becoming concerned about him. By that afternoon, everybody had been calling police and checking with local hospitals and tried to file missing persons reports.
So you said by the afternoon no one had heard or anything?
Yeah.
So was he burned near the railroad tracks? Because don't trains come through pretty regularly?
It wasn't on the tracks.
Okay.
It was near. So while the friends and family were searching for the couple, Chris had already been murdered. Shannon had been tied to a chair where she'd been orally raped by the brothers Lemaricus and Letalvis. She was then untied from the chair and violently beaten, sodomized, and raped. She was kicked in the vagina so hard and so much, and beat on the head specifically, that her groin area suffered extensive bruising. Yeah. According to Lemaricus, Shannon was begging to please don't kill her. It's fucking disgusting. When these men finished with Shannon, they hogtied her and placed her into 5 black trash bags and stuffed her into the trash can in the kitchen. She was still alive when she was placed in the trash can. Lemaricus left the house on Chipman Street to go hang out with his girlfriend. That's where he presented her with gifts that were Shannon's personal items, all while Shannon was slowly suffocating in the trash can in the kitchen. It's believed that Shannon died sometime in the afternoon on January 7th to January 8th. Her attack was in the early hours of the 6th. So, well, I mean, I guess the early hours of the 7th, but I don't know.
She suffocated in the trash can?
Yep. So Lemaricus ends up using Chris's cell phone, and he's also found wearing Chris's shoes, which, by the way, were too small for him.
So do they ever talk to them about what the motivation was? Like, why these two? Or was it just a matter of he's behind on his rent and then they happen to look like silver spoon brats? Not saying they were, but so it was out of jealousy and frustration. They're the haves and he's the have-nots.
No, they don't give details specifically as to what made them kidnap and rape this couple.
Well, just hearing it, it sounds like somebody goes to pay a bill when he doesn't have the money to do so, and then he looks over and sees people who are seemingly carefree and not like there are two vehicles over there. If she got out of one and they're just all hearts and smoochiness and distracted, not to blame them for not being environmentally aware, but I could see there be some hostility and anger because their life is hard and he can't pay his rent and he can't pay for the furniture that he borrowed.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, if he's not paying for it, it's borrowed furniture because it's not his.
That's true. Well, Chris's body was discovered around 12:20 in the afternoon on January 7th by a Norfolk Southern Railroad employee. I'm going to tell you about the medical examiner's report. So it's confirmed that it was Christopher Newsom. His head was wrapped in a gray hooded sweatshirt. A blue bandana was tied around his eyes, and a gray and white sock was rolled up and stuffed into his mouth. And then it was secured in place in his mouth with a shoelace. Chris's leather belt and some floral fabric were wrapped around Chris's ankles to secure them together. And then Chris's wrists were tied together behind his back with a shoelace and some nylon. Chris was wearing a shirt, a t-shirt, and underwear, and nothing else. His feet were bare and muddy. Chris was placed on his back on a comforter and the comforter was wrapped around his body, which, by the way, this is the comforter that the friend had sold Lemaricus or gave him for helping her move, and then was doused with the gasoline and set on fire. It had been confirmed that he had been sodomized several times, at least an hour to 2 hours prior to his death. The medical examiner also noted that Christopher was sodomized with an object and raped by at least one of the men. There was semen found in his body, but the fire had damaged it so that they couldn't use it for DNA. It's also noted that Chris had significant injuries to his anal area and genital area. He suffered lacerations, tearing, and bruising around his anus. The autopsy revealed that Chris had been shot between the back of his neck and shoulder from 2 to 3 feet away with a small caliber bullet. The second shot was to his lower back, and the bullet had traveled upwards, indicating that he was bent over, most likely from being shot the first time. And then the third and final gunshot was fired with the muzzle of the gun pressed against Chris's head right above his right ear. It severed his brainstem, causing instantaneous death. All 3 bullets were lodged inside Chris's body when he was found, but his body was so badly burned that it took dental records to verify that it was, in fact, Christopher Newsom.
It's so sad.
It's so sad. He's only 23. On January 7th, when Channon failed to show up to work, which was uncommon for her, her mother and Kara set out to try to find the couple, and they too were calling the local hospitals and tried to file a missing persons report. Apparently, Shannon's parents' request for help from the local law enforcement fell on deaf ears because the police told them that they would have to go search for themselves because they hadn't been missing for very long.
So I've heard that, though, because we're talking about adults. So an adult can decide that they're tired with life, get up and disappear because that's what they want to. And
yeah.
So I understand too early and it's just somebody panicking because they've watched too much IDTV and the person is fine. They just wanted a break from life.
Yeah.
And it would be a waste of police effort when there are legitimate things to investigate. So I can't look down on them for not jumping on it. They have nothing, like, it's not like their stuff was strewn about outside the vehicle. Like, her house wasn't broken into. They have no reason to believe anything had happened up until this point.
Right.
I feel like once they confirm he's dead, that I would imagine they should be all over where the fuck is Channon.
Yeah. Well, in the process of him being found, they hadn't identified him, her friends, and her mother. I give them some major props for creative thinking because they reached out to Shannon's cell phone provider to find out where her phone had last been used. And they got that information, thankfully. And her phone was last pinged to a Cherry Street area tower.
It's possible, since she was 21 and still in college, perhaps her mom was the owner of that plan.
Perhaps, but at least they didn't give her a hard time, you know?
Well, that's what I was going to say, because you can't just call and ask for anybody else. So I would imagine her mom, it was her mom's plan, her mom's phone, she's paying the bill. She can ask those questions because she's the policy holder.
Right. And they didn't jerk her around because they told her where the phone last pinged, and Shannon's friends and family and Chris's family, they all hopped in their vehicles and started scouring that area, and they found Shannon's abandoned Toyota 4Runner. When they were endlessly searching for this couple and they found Shannon's SUV, it was 1:30 in the morning, Monday the 8th. Keep in mind that they were attacked by these 4 guys
Saturday.
Yeah. And now we're at her friends and family found the vehicle on the wee hours of Monday the 8th. And because it was in an area of town that Shannon and Chris did not go to, I'm guessing because it was the wrong side of the tracks, they notified police. And it was noted that several items were missing from Shannon's 4Runner, including a teddy bear and pictures that she kept in her vehicle. Her phone charger and her iPod were missing. The front seats were pushed far back, meaning like
somebody bigger was in there.
Yeah. And since Shannon wasn't very tall, if she tried to drive, she would not have been able to reach the pedals. They found a pack of Newport cigarettes in the vehicle, but Chris and
smoke.
And neither did Chris. There was also an envelope recovered from the vehicle. And at this point, police were involved. They had fingerprinted the vehicle. They did find fingerprints in the vehicle that led them to Lemaricus, the Chipman Street address where Lemaricus lived, was 2 blocks from where Shannon's car was found. The car was dusted for fingerprints. Evidence was collected from inside, and then it was towed to the police impound lot. Dan Crenshaw, he's a senior evidence technician with the Knoxville Police Department. He's a certified fingerprint examiner. He said that it appeared that the outside of the 4Runner had been wiped clean because there were no prints on it.
But they didn't wipe down the outside or the inside?
Sure didn't.
Makes a lot of sense.
Right? By 11 p.m. on Monday, January 8th, Dan Crenshaw, who was working the night shift, began processing the bank envelope that was found in the backseat of Shannon's car, or Shannon's SUV. By 2:45 in the morning on January 9th, Mr. Dan Crenshaw found a match to Lemaricus Davidson on that envelope. And Dan then realized that Lemaricus's last known address was that Chipman Street address where Shannon's vehicle was abandoned, and near where Chris's body was found, because at this point they've identified that it was Chris and her vehicle's missing, and they still haven't found Shannon. So while he was waiting to have the fingerprint match verified by another technician, he had time to kill. He hopped in his vehicle, and somewhere between 6:30 in the morning and 7, and Dan drove to the Chipman Street address just to kind of check things out and see if there were any signs of activity. But there was nothing. By 7 a.m., the fingerprint match was verified by Tim Shade, another Knoxville Police Department technician. And then the police look up Lemaricus's information and found out that he had outstanding warrants for his arrest for a failure to appear. So the investigators filed for a search warrant for the Chipman Street address in search of Lemaricus on that warrant. That was like their into his house kind of warrant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
A judge. Right. And then a judge signed the search warrant on Tuesday, January 9th at 12:53 p.m. When police go to the address to execute the search warrant, at this point, it's almost 2 o'clock on Tuesday afternoon, January 9th. They found the house empty. At 1:42 p.m., Sergeant Keith DeBow walked into the kitchen and noticed that the trash can was oddly shaped.
Oh, no.
The sergeant feared that someone was hiding in the trash can, so he drew his weapon, lifted the lid, and saw an arm partially covered with fabric. When he touched the arm, he knew that he had discovered a dead body. Now, mind you, at this point, they just discovered Shannon's dead body stuffed in the trash can, and it was eventually discovered that the bags that Channon was in had Lemaricus's fingerprints on them, and they also found the box that the trash bags were in had his fingerprints on them. His sperm was found in Shannon's vagina and anus. Letalvis, his brother, his sperm was found in her mouth. Also in the house were several items that had been missing from Shannon's vehicle, including her purse, the clothing she had on, Shannon's hot pink high heels, her camera, the pictures from her car. They were ripped up and partially burned. Her iPod was found in Lemaricus's bedroom. They can confirm that it was Shannon's iPod because it had an inscription engraved into it.
On the back.
And it said, "Channon Christian, Mom and Dad, we love you." So there was no denying that it was hers. They also found inside the house were Chris's baseball cap and his driver's license. Several of their things had Lemaricus's fingerprints on them. Police found several more items in Lemaricus's homes, like pay stub from Shannon's work and Shannon's mother's Blockbuster card, as well as some personal toiletries and other items. An additional baseball cap that was Chris's that had been in her car. Aside from the sperm found in and on Shannon's body, Lemaricus's sperm was found on her jeans. Letalvis's sperm was found on her camisole, her sweater, and her jeans. Police also found shell casings at Lemaricus's house that matched the bullets that were used to kill Christopher.
So I clearly, like Rome and Slim, or your Letarius and Lemaricus, clearly those two are major players in this, but I haven't heard anything that George or Eric have done.
So we're getting there. The autopsy of Channon revealed that she had been repeatedly and violently raped, both vaginally, orally, and violently sodomized. Shannon's frenulum, which is that little fleshy part in the inside of your lip that connects your lip to your gums, was ripped, and she had cuts and bruising around her mouth. The medical examiner said these injuries were consistent to her mouth from having a object such as a penis being forced in. So I'm guessing it was like she tried to lock her jaw, and so they were like clawing at her face and tearing her lips, trying to open her jaw. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
1 to 2 hours before Shannon's death, her vaginal and genital areas suffered tremendous damage, and the medical examiner said she had cuts and bruises and swelling that were so bad a solid blood clot had formed under the entire area. So it was like just one giant bruise. They said that the rape was caused by a blunt object coming into contact with her genital area with such force to inflict such intense injuries, and that she also suffered bruises to the backs of both of her arms, bruising to both of her sides, the top of her head on both sides, and she also had bruises on the front of her legs, deep bruising to her upper back area near her neck, rug burn and scratches on her lower back and her butt, and she also had a cut on her right hand. Also, her attackers tried to destroy evidence that they were leaving on her body and in her body by making her drink bleach, and then they scrubbed her genitals with bleach. But fortunately, DNA was recovered, like I said, on Shannon's mouth, vagina, and various clothing items. It was also later determined that Shannon's cause of death was positional asphyxiation. So the way they had put her into the trash can and the way they had tied her up, she was unable to breathe or get out of the trash can, which led her to slowly suffocating to death. To be more specific, she'd been forced into a tight fetal position, and then they bound her head and neck and shoulders, and they had her twisted and pressed against her bent knees. Her left cheek had been pressed tightly against her knee, portion of sheer curtain, and it had been tied around her ankles and then wrapped around her neck. A floral fabric, like the one used to bind her boyfriend Chris, had been tied at her thighs, bringing them tightly against her chest. And then a white plastic bag had been put over her head, covering her mouth and nose, and then knotted around at the back of her neck to keep it in place. And then they placed her body into 5 trash bags and put her into the large garbage can that was inside the kitchen.
They put her in 5 trash bags?
Mm-hmm. Like they bagged it. I'd say double bagged, but they quadruple bagged it. Bagged her. I think they expected her to start to smell, and they were trying to contain
So this
the
is
smell.
after she died? But I thought...
No, she's still alive. Yeah. The curtains and bedding used to bind Chris and Shannon, beddings that were given to Lemaricus by that friend or that he helped move. It's disgusting. And I know it's awful, and it makes me sad that they were so brutalized, but for her specifically, having to drink bleach and pour bleach on her open wounds, and she was still alive and begging to not be killed, I think just...
It's disgusting.
It's awful. It's so awful. The medical examiner said the sexual attack on Shannon was, quote, extreme and much more than a simple sexual assault.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. And after confirming that they were Lemaricus's fingerprints and sperm, with all of this, police issue a manhunt for him. Meanwhile, Lemaricus, on January 7th, so right after stuffing her into the trash can, reached out to his ex-girlfriend, Daphne, and she ended up speaking to Lemaricus, saying...
Did he want to give her an iPod?
Sure did. So she ended up speaking to him after finding out that he was trying to reach out to her, using Chris's cell phone, by the way. She spoke to him around 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the 7th. He told her that he had some clothes for her and asked her to come pick the clothing up, but to wait 30 minutes before she headed his way. Now, I don't know about you, Claire, but seeing as how they've only been split up for less than 2 weeks and she most likely suspected him of cheating, she thought that he had another girl in the house. So what do most girls do? They load up friends.
I wouldn't say most, because I wouldn't have answered for one, but I guess I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. It was a strange number, so she answered it. And then he's like, give me 30 minutes and then head over.
Yeah,
and
she's like,
I'd
oh,
be
hell
like,
no.
And click. I wouldn't go over there.
Well, yeah, I know. But you know how you can...
You said most.
If you suspect your significant other of cheating and given the opportunity to catch them red-handed. Huh?
I can tell you, if I had an ex call me up and be like, meet me somewhere in 30 minutes, or meet me at my house in 30 minutes, or give me 30 minutes, anything like that, it'd be like, yeah, good luck with that. Click. They're not currently dating. So
she left him. He's trying to get her back. It's like,
yeah, but
that's why I think
believe you're most. She's not gonna. Most people aren't going to scurry on over there.
So if she's still in my head, this is the way I interpreted it. Okay, it's an unhealthy relationship. So her actions are not that of a sane person. So looking at it as someone in an unhealthy relationship, like if I were in that situation, if I suspected my significant other of cheating on me and they're saying I'm crazy, they're not cheating, but hey, come over, but give me 30 minutes. If that's my opportunity to catch them red-handed,
for your validation,
right, to either validate or whatever, I'm going to go for my own sanity, if that makes sense. Or my own insanity, because if she's answering his calls. She knows he's reaching out to her.
No, she didn't, because he used Chris's phone. So she answered a phone call. She didn't know who it was. And then he smooth talked his way on in. Maybe he even was like, I got me this new phone. I made me some money. I turned over a new leaf. And she was buying into that.
Perhaps.
And maybe if she's all smitten, it wasn't to try to catch him with another lady, that she was all, she's just so excited that he's on
Mm-mm.
Changed his ways, so she was hurrying over there.
Because she loaded up with a bunch of her girlfriends and did not
Let's
wait
go
the
whoop
30.
his ass.
Yeah. So she loads up her friends and they're there in 5 minutes.
She's not a good listener. They load up the lady friends.
They get there in 5 minutes and she was standing at the front door. She walked into the house. Daphne saw Letalvis sitting on the chair next to the kitchen door. George, now mind you, his DNA wasn't found anywhere, but she puts him at the scene of the crime. Does that make sense? So George, who's living there and was seen there,
in the house where the body is.
He's sitting in the chair in the living room. Daphne said she tried to go get her makeup bag from the bathroom, and she walked through the front bedroom to the bathroom, but the bathroom door was locked. It was shut and locked, and Lemaricus said that Vanessa was using the restroom. So Daphne decided to try to go get into the bathroom from another door, which is on the kitchen side.
She didn't believe Vanessa was in there.
Sure didn't.
She thinks there's somebody else hiding. She's going to sniff it out.
I fully expect that, and I think this was a very chaotic situation. But she said that when she approached the kitchen door, Lemaricus grabbed her by the arm and said, "What do you think you're doing? This is my house."
Invited her over
to come get her stuff or come get stuff. He walked her to the front door, handed her a Sears bag that was filled with clothing, and tried to give her cash. She claims she refused the cash, but took the bag of clothing. And then when she returned to her friend's apartment, Daphne said she looked through the bag of clothing and realized they weren't new. They were used and worn. And they weren't hers. So she called Lemaricus and was pissed and was like, "What the hell are you giving me some other chick's clothes for?" And he said that he had purchased them from a used clothing store because he thought she would like them. So the clothes, it was a red skirt, a pink blouse, a pair of glow jeans, and a ring.
Did she go, they'll sell the used clothes clean.
Right.
This one's crusty.
So they were the clothes from Shannon's overnight bag. Yeah. So Daphne gave the jeans to her friend and then told Lemaricus to come get the rest of the clothes since he had a vehicle now, because he was going around telling everybody that he purchased the Toyota 4Runner for $2,500.
He's an idiot.
He sure is. So later Sunday night, or in the wee hours of Monday morning, Lemaricus called Daphne and said that he was locked out of his house because his brother had the keys and wasn't around. So he asked her to come pick him up. And of course, she drove her friend's vehicle to the Chipman house. Lemaricus was outside and he hopped in the car. She drove him back to her friend's apartment where they spent the night together Sunday and Monday night. By Tuesday afternoon, Daphne and Lemaricus were sleeping at Daphne's friend's apartment when she was woken up by Daphne's mother calling her cell phone to inform her that police had found a girl's body inside Lemaricus's house. Lemaricus overheard Daphne's mother telling her about the discovery of Shannon's body, and he begged Daphne to believe him that he had nothing to do with it and that it was all his brother. Daphne told him, "Yeah, so you need to go."
Lying ass cell phone words.
Right? So he begged her to let him stay until after dark, but Daphne, who was pissed, and she found his house keys that he claimed he didn't have, and a black revolver inside his jacket pocket. She's like, no. So you gots to go. Lemaricus was also, by the way, wearing Chris's black and silver Nikes that were too small for him. Yeah.
He wished he could have smaller feet.
Sure did. He was having himself a stepsister moment of Cinderella, trying to squeeze his foot in. And when Daphne said she asked him where he got the shoes from, he claims he bought them from somebody.
I frequently buy shoes that don't fit me off of people.
Right. I thought that was a common practice. He thought he could lose weight in his toes.
Because them ladies' shoes don't mess up your feet enough. Getting them the wrong size seems like a solid plan.
Right. So Daphne drove Lemaricus near Ridgebrook Apartments, which was over near Reynolds Avenue, and just dropped him off. Meanwhile, police discover several phone calls between Lemaricus and Eric Boyd. Police reach out to Eric for information on where could Lemaricus be, and Eric told police officers about a vacant house that he knew Lemaricus liked to hang out at off of Reynolds Avenue.
He liked to hang out there because he didn't have to pay rent.
Yeah. Yeah, probably. Police go to the vacant house and they find Lemaricus and they arrest him on January 11th, 2007. At the time of his arrest, police found Chris's shoes and a .22 high standard revolver. Lemaricus was interrogated about the murders. He told police 5 different stories. 5.
Well, he couldn't remember the ones he told earlier.
Well, they turned out they didn't make any sense, so he had to keep trying to make sense of his lies. One of the stories he said, of course, was he knew nothing about any of the crimes. And then he said...
And then the police were like, so we didn't even say we were talking to you about crimes. And he's like, oh, I just assumed you weren't here for visiting.
So then this wonderful big brother later told police that his little brother, Letalvis, and George arrived at his house around 10 p.m. on Friday or Saturday. He couldn't remember which day, and informed him that they had just carjacked some people who were in a vehicle that they stole. They took the people and the vehicle, and he claimed he went out, saw the victims tied up in the back seat, but he said he didn't want no part of that. So he left to go smoke him some marijuana. And he said he also returned to the house about 20 minutes later to find that Channon said she didn't want to die and that he used Shannon's vehicle. That's why his fingerprints would be found in it, because he went to go do some drug deals while his brother did whatever it was that he did. So that was his story for how things went. And then he also said he didn't go past the living room in his own house, but it is his house. So if they find his fingerprints, it's his house. And that he supposedly never raped Channon. And I guess he was forced to change that story.
Did they ask if he raped Channon, or he's like, I didn't rape anybody. I don't know anything about any crimes. And they're like, so we just asked what you were doing on Saturday.
That would be kind of funny, but no, they were asking specifics. And the same day that Lemaricus was arrested, so January 11th, George, Letalvis, and Vanessa were all arrested in Kentucky. I guess they ran back to Stacy. A search warrant was issued for the house where the 3 of them were arrested, and inside the house they found a computer, which the officers seized it. And when they did, they saw that George and Letalvis had been looking up Tennessee news coverage about the murders of Channon and Chris. Police also found a red purse that contained more items and documents that belonged to Channon, and the other .22 caliber Clark revolver. The revolver that was found in Kentucky when the 3 of them were arrested was ruled out as the murder weapon for Chris. And 2 of the 3 bullets that they found lodged in Chris, the ballistics matched the gun to the weapon that was found on Lemaricus. But the 3rd bullet was so damaged that they couldn't identify which weapon it came from. On January 31st, 2007, Lemaricus, George, Letalvis, and Vanessa, so 4 of the 5, were all charged with 46 counts of murder, rape, robbery, and kidnapping. That's a lot. Each
46?
Each one of them, 46 counts.
So, I know this is slightly off topic, but how do they get that number?
So I could spell it out for you, but it was like they pretty much threw the book at them. So if one charge didn't stick, they had other charges. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This made
46 is a lot.
It's a.
You could run it down of, obviously there's kidnapping, 2 counts there, like
Yeah.
So all 4 of them, or all 5 were?
So 4. Eric has not been arrested yet.
Well, so I feel like again, the brothers seem like obviously they did a lot of the stuff, but I find it hard to believe Vanessa, Eric, and George that they've got anything on them.
So just hang in there, okay? So Letalvis made a statement to the police that his half-brother, Lemaricus, so now you've got both brothers pointing the finger at each other.
Yeah.
But Letalvis said that his half-brother Lemaricus and Eric drove to an apartment complex for someone to go meet a girl, which there's truth in that. No, it's truth in that because Lemaricus was supposed to go pay that chick the money for the furniture. So and Eric is the only one of the 5 that has a vehicle, which I would hope because he's 34 years old. So,
well, in past cases, we've seen that's not actually a thing.
Well, that's true. And he also is unemployed. So, or actually, I'm not sure if he was unemployed.
It was a nice vehicle.
Yeah.
It leaves a storm cloud behind it as he goes.
Scratch that. Eric is the only one with a vehicle, but it is not his. He borrowed it.
Then he's not the only one. Then he doesn't have a vehicle. He's got connections.
He's the only one with access to a vehicle.
And I think nobody would let Lemaricus and his brother have a vehicle because Lemaricus doesn't pay his rent or his payments on his furniture. Who's going to go here? Have some keys. You've been responsible thus far. Oh, didn't you have a stint in jail? Yeah, no, I'm not handing you keys to nothing.
And you top that off with, I would fully expect to get a phone call from Lemaricus saying, so thanks for letting me borrow your vehicle. It done ran out of gas. This is the last place I saw it. If it ain't there, I didn't done steal it and sell it for parts.
I just left the keys in it. You can pick it up.
Yeah. But anywho,
he probably did that to somebody.
Oh, for sure. So Letalvis is telling police
it was probably to Daphne.
So probably why she had to borrow a friend's car to go pick him up. But Letalvis is making his statement that they went to the complex to meet a girl. And that when they arrived to the apartment complex, that Lemaricus and Eric spotted a couple with the SUV, and there was a female in the driver's seat, and she was speaking to a male outside the driver's door. And Lemaricus and Eric, quote, basically carjacked them, and that supposedly, according to Letalvis, they ordered Letalvis to drive back to the Chipman house. And according to Letalvis, his brother Lemaricus had taken Channon to a back bedroom soon after they arrived to the residence, which I fully believe because she was tied up, you know? Mm-hmm. And then Eric, so we're tying Eric into this. Eric drove away with Christopher. Eric supposedly returned to the house without Christopher eventually, and Letalvis denied having any sexual intercourse with Channon, which we know is a lie.
Well, if Eric... So, this is one of his fib stories?
This is Letalvis, so the Rome. Lemaricus
but one of his lying stories, because... How would Eric just drive off with Chris and then reappear without him, and then somehow Chris is raped and shot?
So Lemaricus is the one that had 5 different stories. This is his brother's version of what happened now. And Letalvis is saying that Eric was taking Christopher, and if he raped him, he did that elsewhere.
Yeah. We were just letting Channon nap.
With our penises everywhere on her. Now, as for Vanessa, okay, she admitted to being in the house during all of the crimes and claimed that she had been held hostage by all 4 of the men. Now, her hostage story could have been believable if it weren't for the fact that police recovered a journal from the Chipman Street address, an entry into the journal on January 9th, and it said, "Last night was one of a kind. We stayed with a crackhead that was cool as hell. It snowed a little."
God. Thank God for stupid people.
It snowed a little bit, but it's already melted. Let's talk about adventures. I had one hell of an adventure. Hell of an adventure, by the way, was in all caps. Since I've been in the big TN, it's a crazy world these days. I love the fun adventures and lessons I've learned. It's going to be a long, interesting year. So, a forensic document examiner confirmed that the handwriting in the journal was Vanessa's. So, not so much a hostage.
Yeah, unless I don't know.
She found it fun. Like, what the? Ugh. So George was facing 46 counts or 46 charges. He was charged with 16 counts of felony murder in the rape, robbery, and kidnapping of Channon and Christopher. He also faced 2 charges of premeditated murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery, 4 counts of aggravated kidnapping, 20 counts of aggravated rape, and 2 counts of theft. Letalvis was facing the same 46 charges as George, but he also was charged with assaulting a correctional officer while he was in jail waiting for his trial. Lemaricus faced the same 46 charges as George and his half-brother Letalvis, but he also was arrested for committing a robbery at a Pizza Hut one day after the murders.
I can't roll my eyes more in this case.
I know. And up
Did the
next,
boys also do some journaling?
no, but they all point the fingers at each other, and it's like, ugh.
That's because nobody wants to confess they put their penis in another dude's ass.
Right. And then up next, we've got
the fact that he was the first pick.
So in my head, just to put logic, if you can, to this mess, I think they victimized him first because he was able to
back.
Yeah. Like he would have been more of a difficult person to hold on to. But up next, we've got Vanessa, and she was facing 40 charges. She was arrested on 12 counts of felony murder related to the rape, kidnapping, theft, and robbery, and only 1 count of premeditated murder for the murder of Channon.
I feel like only premeditation is reaching, because it seems to me like
I think that what they were doing is if she knew that they went and murdered Chris and she held Channon hostage, knowing that they were planning to come back and kill her, that she facilitated that crime.
Yeah, she had participation. She wasn't blind to all the things going on. Right. And my guess would be the amount of beating Channon endured. There's no way it was done quietly.
Right. And she didn't deny being there for any of that. But she was only charged with 1 count of aggravated robbery for Chris, 4 counts of aggravated kidnapping, and 20 counts of aggravated rape, and 2 counts of theft for Chris, for the whole Christopher situation. And then we've got Eric Boyd. So from what I gather, Eric was not arrested and indicted at the same time as the rest of his little posse. He ended up being indicted by a grand jury on August 23rd of 2007. So they were January 31st, and he was a few months later. They charged him with being an accessory to carjacking, resulting in the serious bodily injury to another person. So that's what Eric was arrested for, because he was there when they carjacked him, because he was the one that borrowed the vehicle that led to driving these pieces of garbage over there. So he was a witness to that and did nothing. So that was Eric's arrest. So Letalvis, Lemaricus, George, and Vanessa were scheduled to be tried separately between May and August of 2008. In February of 2008, their trial dates were moved to 2009 by Judge Richard Baumgardner. He was the presiding judge over these foul individuals. On April 16th, 2008, Eric Boyd was found guilty of being an accessory to a fatal carjacking and also for failing to report the location of a known fugitive. He was sentenced to the maximum of 18 years in a federal prison. So that's Eric. He got 18 years. Mm-hmm. George, he was tried on August 11th, 2009. Judge Baumgartner allowed George's jailhouse phone calls to be admitted as evidence, which helped incriminate him. And on December 8th, 2009, George was found guilty on 4 capital charges. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole for each of the 4 convictions. So that's 4 life sentences without parole. On August 25th, 2009, Letalvis Cobbins was found guilty of the murders of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom. He was facing the death penalty because he was convicted of first-degree murder in the case of Channon. He was found guilty of facilitating the murder of Christopher. He was acquitted on the rape of Christopher because there was nothing to tie him to that.
Mm-hmm.
And on August 26th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. On October 28th, 2009, our leader of the pack, Lemaricus Davidson, was unanimously found guilty and received death by lethal injection on the 4 capital charges, 2 of first-degree murder and 2 of premeditated first-degree murders of both Channon and Christopher. On June of 2010, Lemaricus was sentenced to an additional 80 years for the additional charges. And during the sentencing of Lemaricus, Judge Baumgartner said that the crime was, quote, one of the most incredibly outrageous, cruel, and inhumane cases this court has ever seen. He was also quoted as saying, "How people can engage in this type of conduct is just unexplainable. There really is no sentence great enough to punish you for the conduct you have been convicted of."
I don't know. Raped with a tire iron and then put down after your asshole is bled for 48 hours, I feel like would be up there. But, and that wasn't a joke, but be up there. But would be a start. But I agree. And you know what? I don't even understand how people in a group can do that and nobody does the, hey, maybe we should go play Skippo.
Right?
I mean, not to say I understand it when it's somebody who's by themselves and getting carried away, but where is the checks of each other in a group? Like, yeah, so this doesn't sound like a solid, great idea with the whole carjacking and raping of people and putting them in a trash can. Perhaps we can find a different group activity. I hear ice skating is new.
Yeah. So on May 13th, 2010, Vanessa was acquitted of the first-degree murder charges.
What?
But she was found, but she was found guilty of lesser charges. She was sentenced to 53 years in prison. Shannon's father said during Vanessa's sentencing, "For me personally, you took my baby. You took my opportunity to say yes to a young man one day. You took my wedding dance away. You took my opportunity to hold her child, my grandbaby." Now, you would think that would wrap things up, right? They've all been convicted. However,
there was an appeal.
Oh, well, yeah, they appealed all that. But the sentencing judge, Judge Richard Baumgartner, was one of Knox County's 3 criminal court judges. He was forced to resign as a judge in March of 2011 for having a drug problem. He was purchasing pain pills from convicted felons in his courtroom. Another woman had accused him of trading legal favors for sex during breaks of court sessions. Like, he'd call a break and then go trade sexual favors in exchange for lenient sentencing and things of that nature.
From the other attorneys or
no, from the criminals.
Inmates?
The criminals. He pled guilty to official
misconduct. What the hell's going on in Tennessee?
Well, it's just this judge. But he pled guilty to official misconduct. And it was decided that the 2 years prior, he was doing drugs that whole time while conducting trials, and that he had in fact been impaired. So every case that he sat over had to be reevaluated. And he ended up being disbarred in September of 2011. Now,
if you tell me any of these people are out because of this, Andrea, I'm not talking to you the rest of the day.
You like to threaten to not talk to me anymore. Just
That's because you find these cases and like to torment me with them.
Okay, well, hang in there. I'm almost done. Hang in there. So if you're a criminal who's been convicted by a drug-addicted judge, what do you think your lawyers are going to do?
Jump all over it like a starving dog on a steak.
Sure are. They appealed these trials, and on December 1st, 2011, they were all set free. No, I'm just kidding. So on December 1st... I was about to hang up in this jackass. So, okay, listen. So on December 1st, 2011, a new judge, Judge John Carey Blackwood, granted new trials for all four defendants, all four of them, because Eric Boyd did not.
There's 5.
Yeah. So he granted them new trials. Their trials were scheduled for June through November of 2012. Eric?
Why?
Because I don't think he had filed for anything yet. He was happy with his 18 because, as we've learned, you don't serve the full 18. So
yeah, he wasn't going to push it.
Right. So the new trials were scheduled for June through November of 2012. There was a bail set for Vanessa at $1 million because her sentence was the only one that would have possibly allowed for parole. Mm-hmm. Now, due to double jeopardy laws, which I don't know why I'm stuck on these double jeopardy cases all of a sudden.
And the penis choppings.
Yeah, and penis choppings. All of these defendants could face the same crimes, but if found guilty, they could not receive additional time to their sentencing. Does that make sense? Like, even though Letalvis could have been given the death sentence, because he was not originally given it, he was just given life without parole, he could only get, if found guilty, life without parole. And just like with Vanessa, she had received 53 years. She could not receive a more strict sentence. It could only be lesser, which I think is completely stupid.
Yeah, that's crap.
Right. So basically they get a redo, and if they decide they don't like the redo, they can go with the original stuff. It's stupid. But in May of 2012, the Tennessee Supreme Court overturned Judge Blackwood's ruling for new trials for Letalvis, Cobbins, Lemaricus, Davidson, and George Thomas. They said that the judge's misconduct outside of the courtroom did not necessarily require a new trial unless the misconduct is shown to have affected the trial's proceedings, which they could not prove, according to the Supreme Court. The lawyers went in front of Judge Blackwood and they were like, hey, can you consider new trials again for these same 3? And again, Judge Blackwood agreed in June of 2012 to grant new trials for Letalvis, Lemaricus, and George, stating it was based on the 13th juror rule. Do you know what the 13th juror rule is? I think that's where the judge counts, but since the judge was...
Let me do some Googling.
Okay.
In a criminal jury trial in the state of Tennessee, 12 jurors are tasked with determining a verdict. Under Tennessee law, a trial judge has a duty to act as the 13th juror, not to deliberate with the jury on the case, but to provide an independent layer of review in assessing the weight of the evidence. Examining the weight of the evidence requires consideration of a number of factors, including resolving conflicting evidence presented at trial. If the trial judge determines that the weight of the evidence is against the verdict, the trial judge must grant a new trial.
Gotcha. Well, that was the excuse that they used. Now, because Judge Blackwood would talk to the media regularly and did not follow what the Supreme Court was asking to be done, among other things, the prosecution filed to have him recused from the case. And lo and behold, Judge Blackwood stepped down, and senior judge Walter Kurtz was named to oversee the trials. Now, retrials at this point were denied for Letalvis and Lemaricus, and George and Vanessa were granted new ones. So the brothers, they were told, piss off, your DNA was found on her. You can't deny the facts of the case. Whatever the judge did or didn't do during your trial, your case is not going to be found any different. So you don't need new trials. But with George and Vanessa, they were granted new trials, which brings us to them. So just to recap, Vanessa had originally received 53 years for her part in the rapes and murders of Channon and Chris, and she faced the same charges as her first trial, but was subsequently found guilty on serious but lesser charges during her first trial. And she was found guilty for just facilitating the aggravated kidnapping, aggravated rape, and murder of Channon. Vanessa's lawyers requested that her sentencing should only be 20 years, but prosecution was asking for 50 years, and the new judge sentenced Vanessa right in the middle. He gave her 35 years, and the breakdown specifically was that she received 25 years for the murder facilitation of Channon, 6 years for the kidnapping of Channon, and 4 years for facilitating Shannon's rape. Her resentencing was in February of 2013. She appealed her sentencing, but that was denied in 2014. The judge on that appeal said that the facts at the trial showed that Vanessa was in the Chipman Street house for nearly 2 days, where Channon was confined and brutally raped before she was tied up, wrapped in 5 plastic bags, and stuffed into a garbage can, where she died from asphyxiation, and also pointed out that her journal entries, which were written after the murders, described, quote, "one hell of an adventure in the Big TN," and that she had also loved her life. So therefore, she was considered a dangerous offender. I agree with all of that. Yeah. She's a piece of shit. You don't deserve a lesser sentence. You were there for it. You chose to do nothing and enjoyed it. So Vanessa, being stuck with her 35-year sentence because she's considered a dangerous offender, became eligible for parole in October of 2014. That parole hearing was rescheduled to December of 2014. That was denied. They told her no. But she was eligible again for parole in 2020. On December 8th, 2020, Channon and Christopher's parents appeared in front of the parole board and made statements requesting Vanessa's parole to be denied. The 7 parole board members unanimously decided to deny Vanessa's parole, and also that she would not be eligible for another parole hearing for another 10 years. So that would put her in December of 2030. As for George Thomas, his retrial started on May 17th, 2013. He was found guilty on 38 counts. So on his original 46, he was found guilty of 38. So he's being retried on those. He was sentenced again to life in prison or 127 years. On June 4th, 2013, Judge Kurtz sentenced George to 2 more life sentences for the murders and additional 25 years for the rapes. He appealed his sentencing several times, and his conviction was upheld in 2015. And the United States Supreme Court did not agree to hear his case in 2016. So let's not forget about Eric Boyd. He had received just the 18 years for his participation for driving, right? Mm-hmm. On March 20th, 2018, 11 years after Channon and Christopher's murders, a grand jury returned 36-count indictment charging Eric Boyd with first-degree felony murder, first-degree premeditated murder, aggravated robbery, aggravated kidnapping, and aggravated rape. Eric was transported and booked where he was held on $1 million bond, and finally went to trial in August of 2019. Now, mind you, he was in prison for the 18-year sentence, but they brought these charges against him, and George, good old George boy, who had that 127-year sentence, testified
on his behalf,
testified against Eric. He accused Eric of the rape and murder of Christopher Newsom. But it is pointed out by Eric's attorneys that George didn't do this out of the goodness of his heart.
No, he's bitter and wants to take everybody down.
No, George received a plea deal and got a more lenient sentence for testifying against Eric. He will have completed his sentence because he got 50 years instead of his 127. and he will be eligible for release in 2053, which I realize is still a long ways away. But
I can see why they negotiated that. Like, sure, George, sure, we'll give you only another 30 years if you get this feller in jail too, because they all needed to go.
it puts him in his 70s, so
Well,
still, he'll be in his 70s when he's released.
no,
If he gets released.
Well,
that's still
I don't hear a lot of 70-year-old men doing the rapings.
I just found me a new mission for another case. No, I'm just kidding.
Of course you did.
But none of the other defendants.
But only if a penis falls off, apparently.
Okay. So anyway, that's what George received in exchange for testifying against Eric in 2019. And because none of the other defendants in the case had any means of transportation, and Eric borrowed a vehicle and drove it to pick up the other 4 defendants and took them to the Ridgebrook apartments, and he was aware of the robbery, carjacking, and kidnapping of Channon and Chris. And the vehicle he borrowed was also seen outside of Chipman Street home during the hours of the attack on both Channon and Chris. He couldn't say he wasn't there. Eric said he didn't do it. That was his defense. I didn't do it. Can't prove it. There is no evidence tying him other than testimony from George and then the chick that he borrowed the car from, which, by the way, she testified in all the other trials that she let him borrow her car. And then during his trial, she claims she couldn't remember. So the judge said,
how often do you let people borrow your car that you can't remember?
So I think they were boyfriend and girlfriend. And then she was like, I don't remember if you borrowed my car or not.
So the judge, her kisses through the plate glass.
Perhaps. So the judge allowed the prosecution to use her testimony, and because she testified so many other times in the previous cases as evidence.
Allow us to read your previous statements under oath to refresh your memory, ma'am.
Right. He claims he didn't do it. 3 people testified that the car he borrowed was there. He was the one that did in fact borrow it. He did drive them there. He facilitated this whole thing. The prosecutors told the jurors, Mr. Boyd was part of it. I don't care whose penis was in Miss Christensen. I don't care whose penis was in Chris. They're all responsible.
The judge said that?
The prosecutor.
Oh.
Which I agree with. You're all responsible for it. You did nothing to stop it. You all participated in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and even if Vanessa only held her until they got back from raping and murdering Chris, she still allowed it. She could have called the police then and maybe even saved Chris's life.
Yeah.
And Shannon's, but...
For sure Shannon's, but I don't know if Chris would have survived. I don't know how long he was...
It depends on... Well, no, like, if you think of it in terms of they went missing around 9, if he wasn't dead or the gunshots, they weren't heard till about 1:45 in the morning, that's several hours of time for people to come to their senses. That's why it makes me curious if the whole... I guess drugs and alcohol didn't play a factor, because they could have said, oh, no, we were on drugs and couldn't remember and went crazy.
Yeah.
Which makes it worse if they were in a completely crystal clear mindset and just the amount of evil, they deserve to die. I'm sorry. Jail is too good for them. And this is when, again, I'm an advocate for the death penalty. We don't use it enough. These people don't deserve life in jail. They deserve to be put down.
I agree. But the jury found
Put down with a lead pipe in their ass.
That deserves a moment of silence.
It sure does not.
The processing of it.
Chris and Shannon deserve a moment of silence. But kind of forced you to be quiet for a second.
Sure did. So Eric was found guilty, and he was given 2 life sentences for his participation in facilitating the crimes against Channon and Chris. He was 47 at the time of his conviction. In 2019. He was serving 18 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would have made him eligible for release in 2022. But because he was arrested or booked, because he was already in jail, and charged with the additional crimes and found guilty in 2019. He was immediately sentenced to life in prison, so he will never see a day of freedom.
Good.
But that is the murders of Channon and Christopher.
I do hope each one of them in jail wakes up to a penis shoved into their ass or their mouth and end up with like claw marks on their cheeks and teeth falling out because they are fucked to near death. And I say near death in jail because that way they can go on and be every single day. And I hope their genitals also turn into one giant blood clot.
And I hope they get their little frenulum thing ripped open in their mouths, because I don't know why, but that's my plate of cookies for me, is like knowing that she fought to try to keep all these men that are beating her and torturing her, and she tried to keep her jaw shut, and they ripped her lip open. Ugh.
I feel like it was a sharp fingernail.
It was, I think, because the bruising on her face, that they were pulling at her lips to try to pry her jaw open.
Thanks for that. I'm glad to know they won't be out.
Well, Vanessa will be eligible for parole in 2030. I mean, I think she's sick and twisted also. She is just as bad as the men folk, because like you said, she could have gotten help for Channon, and she could have done a lot of different things. But then after it's all said and done, there was no sign of remorse. She wrote in her diary that she was having a blast and one hell of an adventure. That's disgusting. Just thought,
this is how they do things in Tennessee.
Well, now she gets to see how they do things this way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.